It is another edition of Thinking Out Loud. I have many thoughts which I would like to think, and perhaps we shall say them out loud. Welcome in, friends, after Wild Card Weekend is finally done. The weekend extended into Monday, as was scheduled, fifth consecutive year. We have a Monday night game because fifth consecutive year, we have 14 teams in the playoffs. And through 5 years now, only one 7 seed. We expanded the playoffs. Only one 7 seed has won a game. Or as my friends in Dallas like to reverse it and flip it and tell me, only one 2 seed has lost a game. That would be the Dallas Cowboys or the Green Bay Packers in 2023. The 7 seeds couldn't do it this weekend. But how about the Los Angeles Rams, Sam Betesh, who did do it on Monday evening? They just dominated. You want a statement win? That is your statement win. They dominated and they dominated and they dominated and they beat up the Minnesota Vikings and did so 27-9. A game in which Matthew Stafford was a magician early and the defense was consistent for all 4 quarters, harassing Sam Darnold and sacking him 9 times. 999, which ties an NFL postseason single game record.
9
NFL
times, as someone once said?
Postseason single game record. There's a Jared Verse scoop and score. It was just utter domination. And the Rams, in a game in which it's corny, it's cliched, but we live here. It is true. They were playing for the city, for all of Southern California. And, man, that was awesome. It was just great.
Look, as we had said, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday of elimination football in the world when you include college football. And yes, the Vikings certainly eliminated, wiped out here. But what the Rams did, and I had said it to you, I thought this was going to be challenging, a more challenging week, if you will, for the Rams than the Vikings. And it very well probably was, from a standpoint of thinking you were going to do it one way and then doing it another, thinking you were going to be playing at home, quote, and then playing in Arizona. But that was as prepared for an opponent as we saw anybody all weekend. And I don't know, was that the most shocking? Yeah, that's probably the most shocking final score that we'll see of this weekend. Yeah, I would say that was it. That was the exclamation point. Monday certainly had it. That was wow. 9 was wow. 9-9, both in the total for the Vikings and the sacks for the Rams. 9 will be the story of this night.
You know what? Maybe it is just my unwavering faith in Sean McVay, Les Snead, Kevin Demoff, Tony Pastors, the people who run the organization. I never really had this game a doubt whatsoever. Yeah, they dominated. I expected the Vikings to play a better game. So maybe the domination is significant. And the Vikings were in a tough spot. They're a 14-win team in the best division in football, and they had to go on the road. The Vikings are the first 14-win team to ever lose a road playoff game in NFL history. Like all the history of the NFL. Like back to the car dealership in Canton. History of the NFL. All 14 teams, or rather 14 wins, and they lost. I was texting this morning with some Rams officials, Rams coaches, and they all said, like, we're good. Like, how are you? Like, are you guys okay back in LA? Like, we're talking to neighbors. We're making sure our neighborhoods and our homes are okay. Our friends, our family, they're okay. But everybody was with them. Everyone brought the kids. Everyone brought the dogs, the cats. I mean, Connor McDermott, the Rams offensive lineman, backup O-lineman, former UCLA guy. Connor McDermott brought his Great Dane on the plane. You ever seen a Great Dane? They're like the size of racehorses. Brought him on the plane. Like he's walking up and down the aisles of a 777 heading to Phoenix for a 1-hour flight. They were confident. They were good. They did everything they could to make that a Rams home game. They had the Mariachi Rams there. They had Aaron Donald there. They had Witt there. They had Torrey Holt there. It was the Rams' house. Sam Lagana, the voice of SoFi Stadium on Rams game days, was there in the building shouting for everyone to get up. It was a Rams home game. I kind of sort of wish I went. I didn't go. Woke up this morning with an airline ticket and was thinking of going. As you can hear my voice, I feel like garbage. And I did not go. I had to do Sirius XM NFL radio this morning. And honestly, I just didn't sleep and couldn't do it. I kind of regret not going because it was something that we will be talking about not only in LA, but around the NFL for years. What the Rams were able to pull off, what the league was able to pull off, and what that team, coached by Sean McVay, did against a 14-win team. Let's go over the players, Sam, that were dominant today for the Rams. Guys like Jared Verse and Cam Kitchens and Byron Young and Kobe Turner. Actually, let's do this because let's go down the list of players that made an impact today that the Rams have drafted in the last 2 years. Are you ready?
Let's go for it.
Thank you. I had to cough there. Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Cam Kitchens, Josh Carty, Jordan Whittington, Bo Limmer, Steve Avila, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Davis Allen, who had a touchdown, Puka Nacua, the punter Zach Evans, Ethan Evans, Desjuan Johnson, he had a sack. And if you want to go back to 2022, let's throw in Kobe Durant, Kyron Williams, Quentin Lake. All those players, except for one, have one thing in common. Only one of them was a first-round pick. Jared Verse, and he had a scoop and scored tonight. He was a force of nature. He got in the end zone. He got to Sam Darnold. All those other guys I listed, didn't even include Blake Corum because he broke his arm, didn't play. He's out for the postseason. All those guys were selected in the last 3 drafts, and none of them was a first-round pick. Like, I'm going to take my cap off right now. Tip of the cap to you, Les Snead, because that is ridiculous.
And keep this in mind, 9 sacks in a dominating defensive wildcard performance the year that Aaron Donald retires.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first season without the most dominant player defensively of his era.
Of our generation.
And they put forth the defensive stamp on Wild Card Weekend without him. 9 sacks on a defensive team that does not include Aaron Donald any longer. Wow. What a statement.
Yeah. And I hate to say it because I really do like Sam Darnold personally and as a quarterback. You can't tear down 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, and 14 wins. That happened. The last 5 months happened. They really happened. 4 months. Like, all those games were played, and he was great. 14 wins. Double-digit 100 passer rating games. Sam Darnold is going to get paid. But there is recency bias, and people are going to turn on the tape and say, against Brian Flores, and then tonight against the Rams, and give Chris Shula credit, they turned the heat on, and Sam Darnold melted. He melted. Now, he's going to get paid. He's a good quarterback. He's a winning quarterback. He proved it. I think he lived up to his draft billing finally, and I'm happy for him. But it was always going to be a difficult quarterback conversation for the Vikings after the season if it was a quick out, if they were a one and done, if they didn't make it to the conference championship game, if it didn't look good on the way out. It was always going to be a difficult conversation. Now it is a painful conversation because you drafted J.J. McCarthy for a reason. And honestly, there's no reason to pay Sam Darnold right now. There just isn't. If you had taken you to the Super Bowl, it is a different conversation. Right now, I think the Vikings have their answer. As painful as it is to walk away from the memories of the last 4 months, organizationally, you have to give J.J. McCarthy his shot. You have to. And then you have to wonder aloud, where does Sam Darnold go? People have said, go to the Browns. The Browns can't pay him $30 million, guys. That's just not an economic reality, right? If you want to say Sam Darnold's baseline is the Baker Mayfield contract, roughly $35 million a year, that's not going to be in Cleveland. Tell you where it could be. people say the Giants. If I'm Sam, I got New York PTSD. I have NYPTSD on my hat. I ain't going back. Okay. If I'm Sam Darnold, Sam Betesh, Sam Darnold, I'm going to Pittsburgh. If they'll have me, I'm going to Pittsburgh. I mean, go down the list. AFC East, there are no starting jobs open unless you want to back up and be a valuable backup behind Tua. I mean, that's a thought. AFC North, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, those are open jobs. Cleveland can't pay you likely. Pittsburgh can. AFC South, maybe you go to Indy. Maybe. Tennessee's going to draft a quarterback. Do you want to be the bridge there? Nah. The Raiders? Maybe. I don't know. Who's going to be the coach? Do you want him? You want to go to a winner? I'm telling you right now, I'm going to Pittsburgh.
I love the thought of Pittsburgh. You had said this was going to be quite a conversation for the Steelers should that game turn out the way we both thought it would on Saturday night, and it did in every way. The Steelers were really never in that game, and this was going to be a what next, and are you essentially paying Russell Wilson? So there's a similar conversation. Basically, Vikings are having the same conversation that Pittsburgh is, and you're solving one with the other, which is fascinating. This reminds me of what you just said in Darnold making a significant run. Had it been a significant run, the Eagles in 2017 won the Super Bowl with famously a backup quarterback in Nick Foles and had to make the decision, but they had to make it 1 year later. So they were in the fortunate spot. They won a Super Bowl, so it's already a different conversation. They were able to hold on to Nick Foles in a backup role with Wentz there, and they didn't have to have the Foles conversation until the next year, and he signed the big contract in Jacksonville. So they were a little fortunate. Two things that were different here. Number one, they won a Super Bowl. So the magical run that you were talking about actually happened, which it did not here. So this conversation is now not even really that emotional. It's 14 wins, yes, but this won't have that sort of nostalgic grip of what happened. And remember, Minnesota, when they did have a magical run, a miracle in Minnesota with Case Keenum, they did not lay out and pay Case Keenum. This is a team that also they could have ponied up for Kirk Cousins. Not that anyone was necessarily clamoring for that, but could have happened. And Cousins did win a playoff game. And I always think when it comes to these conversations, the fear for these organizations, it's Daniel Jones. It is. That's the recent contract that teams will ask themselves, oh, wow, if we do this wrong. And again, Jones was coming off a playoff win, ironically enough, against a Vikings team, and he was paid.
And a road win at that.
And yes, an impressive road win from Daniel Jones in Minnesota, and he was paid. And at that time, as you have said many times, it made sense. It felt like the right move at that time to pay him. Now, of course, the retrospect is it's $40 million, and it looks like garbage, and that's what Minnesota's fear is. I think I love the Steelers thing. I was going to go down the road with you and talk about, and sort of talk about the New York situation, but I think you're right.
Why would he do it? Why would he go play for a bad Giants team?
No, it's you're right.
They get beaten up by the back pages again.
And again, knowing what it felt like to have support for the first time in his career. The Minnesota stop for him, outside of maybe a 5-game stretch with Matt Rule in Carolina, this is as supported as Sam Darnold has ever felt in his career. He knows what it's like to not have talent around you, and I'm sure he doesn't want that again. He knows it. He knows it. His agent knows it. No, forget it. Who wants that?
Yeah. I mean, he's going to get beaten up like Drew Lock, and he's a better quarterback than Drew Lock. Look, the Giants going to look different. You can't say drop him in New York. It's going to look different. They're going to have different pieces around him. You could begin negotiating with free agents on March 10th. Go ahead, mark it down. We're inside of 2 months. March 12th is the start of the new league year. You will never on the show hear the phrase legal tampering. It's not tampering. You're allowed to have negotiations. So don't call it tampering. It's the negotiation window. March 10th, and then March 12th, and then Sam Darnold will find a job. I say it should be Pittsburgh because the Steelers. Yeah, go ahead.
I want you to finish the thought on the Steelers. I was only going to say one other that is interesting, and I think it's going to matter. Of course, the head coach is not there, but New Orleans has shown the ability to compete, has shown the ability to support a quarterback. And even in a role, they have shown that. And they certainly have questions at quarterback at the moment. And that would be, I would imagine there'll be conversations there as well with Darnold.
They have some major roster deficiencies and some major checks that they still owe. The Saints, for years, give Mickey Loomis credit. Sean Payton with him, his partner earlier, for years. They have found a way to play salary cap games and work magic and kick the can down the road and put it all on a credit card. Some of those bills come due, including money on the books this year, significant money for Derek Carr, and it remains to be seen who the head coach is. Oh, by the way, Mike McCarthy used to be an assistant there. Keep your eye on that one. Just saying. Real quick thought here on the Steelers, by the way. They are in purgatory because they are good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to win. They had the most expensive defense in football that the last 5 games of the season was bad. Matter of fact, since they beat the Browns in Pittsburgh December 8th, they haven't held a lead. Haven't held a lead. They're the only there are 3 teams that lost their last 5 games. 2 of them are picking 1 and 2 in the draft. The other is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette front page on Sunday morning. Let me read you the headlines. Jason Mackey column. After another collapse in one-and-done postseason, the Steelers must make actual changes. Ray Fittipaldo's Steelers report card. F is for flat. Yet another inspiring performance. Joe Starkey. Besides finding a new coach, Steelers must find a franchise quarterback by any means necessary. Jerry Dulac. Steelers talk of fixing longstanding problems rings hollow one last time. The pitchforks are out. You say, wait a minute. How can you get rid of Mike Tomlin? He's never had a losing season. You're right. If Mike Tomlin got fired, he'd be the head coach of the Bears before we were able to figure out how to right-click and put this thing on YouTube. Okay? He'd be the head coach of the Bears that quickly. I guarantee you. And you know what? They would build a new stadium in Chicago by Monday. But the Steelers aren't going to move on. I guarantee you. Unless Mike Tomlin wants to move on, which he's not going to do that. Why quit? They want to fire me, right? Why quit? And why say trade me? Because why would I want to go to a team that have to give up draft capital to get me? Then I get there, they don't have the draft capital. No, that doesn't make sense. But let me give you some stats here on Mike Tomlin. Real quick. What the Steelers have done in their last, let's see, how many ever playoff games? Because, again, Myles Garrett and the Browns have won a playoff game more recently than T.J. Watt and the Steelers. T.J. Watt, worth repeating, has never won a playoff game as a Pittsburgh Steeler. Matter of fact, they simply haven't won one since they drafted him. And he's got like 115 career sacks. Keep that in mind. 2017, the Steelers fell behind 10-0. They lost 36-17 to the Patriots. 2018, they fell behind 14-0 to the Jaguars. They lost 45-42. 2021, they lost 28-0, or they fell behind 28-0 to the Browns. It was 4 years ago. That's why my voice sounds like this. They lost 48-37. 2022, they lost 42-21. 2024, they fell behind 14-0 to the Bills, lost 31-17. 2005, they fell behind 14-0 to the Steelers. They lost 28-14. They have not only lost their last 6 playoff games, they haven't led in any of them. So they're not good enough to win, but they're not bad enough to get a good quarterback. So what do? And that is franchise purgatory. Maybe you trade TJ Watt and move to the top of the draft. But if you're the Titans, why would you take TJ Watt? He's closer to 30. He's got a lot of sacks, but he doesn't make you better. You need a quarterback. If you're the Browns, you sure as heck aren't taking him. Like, what's he going to get you? Cam Hayward can't get you anything. He's 35. George Pickens, nobody wants to deal with him. Nobody wants to give him a contract either. Minka, not going to move you up in the first round. Like, what are your assets that you have that can move you up in the first round? Jalen Warren? Nope. Najee? Free agent. He's gone. What do you got? What do you got? Your rookie linebacker from NC State? He's great. He had 7 years in college, has 35 injuries. You're not going to get up in the first round. So what are you going to do? I think Sam Darnold works, but they don't have a lot of options.
You may have nailed it in regards to what they have as an asset. Maybe Mike Tomlin. I mean, we've seen
He's
coaches get traded.
Asset.
We've seen coaches get traded, and maybe Tomlin is that asset that moves them up in the draft. If you're the Steelers, you said it, 6 in a row losses in the postseason. This is also a team that didn't score once on their opening drive this season. Once. That feels impossible, yet it happened.
Yeah, and you script everything. That should be your best offensive drive.
It certainly should get you a point. It should get you a field goal throughout 18 weeks, you would think.
With the best kicker in the NFL.
But by far. And it did not happen. And 2 quarterbacks who were capable of winning games, clearly, as was proven. And we all thought that Tomlin was making a crazy move going to Russell Wilson. And he turned out to be right in the end. I mean, that put them in position to win the division. And it didn't happen. In regards to your statement about purgatory, I just have a question. If you think you polled most NFL fans on being in position to make the postseason every single year, they would take this over that shot and that miracle season at winning it all and really being a Super Bowl team. And again, this is not a Super Bowl starved franchise by any means. And this is that, which also means they've got expectations of winning it. But my question is, if you talk to Carolina fans and New Orleans fans, and if you talk to Giants fans right now and said, okay, we can put you in that 9.5 win situation every season, would you take it?
Of course you would.
Probably. And yet you're right. In the NBA, it's easier because when you're making the playoffs, it doesn't feel like an accomplishment. Whereas in the NFL, it is an accomplishment to make the playoffs. So that still is something. But to your point, it has been clear and obvious, not at the level of competition once you turn that page to wildcard weekend. Clear and obvious in these games. Because even, by the way, the closest score you mentioned there was the Jacksonville game. And if you remember that game, they had fell behind horribly in that game and came back late to make that interesting.
I actually don't remember. I remember that they made the Browns game kind of interesting. Like got to within 2 scores. Al Michaels on Saturday evening during this one, the loss to the Ravens, said something like, well, because Al did the COVID game in 2020. He's like, well, I mean, they made that one kind of interesting. Maybe they can make this kind of interesting. Listen,
that's not what you
Steelers fans. Listen, you're going to come at me as a Browns guy and go, we would take what we have any day. Most fan bases would. I'm not ripping down the success of the franchise, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the same movie. You want to see a different movie. You love the success, but you want to see a different movie. The frustration is real. Listen to the Steelers' exit interviews. Listen to them in the locker room on Saturday night. Listen to George Pickens when asked, well, are you optimistic for next year? Nah. Thanks, George. You got to do something. I don't know what the answer is. I just don't. All right, those are the Steelers. Want to tap the base on the Cowboys. This is not an I told you so, but I told you so. I've been saying for weeks, the issue isn't does Mike McCarthy come back? Jerry Jones probably wants him back. He has 3 12-win seasons. Dak got hurt this year. This team fought and was winning games in December, at least a little bit, with Cooper Rush. The issue was, are you willing to make a multi-year commitment, probably at 10, 11, 12 million a year to Mike McCarthy and bring back his entire staff? Because you don't just bring back a coach on a 1-year deal, because that's an entire coaching staff that you're bringing back on a 1-year deal. That's simply not how this works. Mike McCarthy can't tell his subordinates, come back on a 1-year deal, because those coaches have families. They've got kids in school. They would rather seek a long-term commitment, right? Buy, not rent. It doesn't work that way. If you bring the coach back, it's got to be a multi-year deal. And I've been saying that for months. Sam, we've been saying for weeks on this podcast, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, will you make a long-term commitment to to Mike McCarthy? And Jerry Jones decided this morning he is not ready to make the long-term commitment, just as we said. He doesn't want to do a one-year deal. That Mike McCarthy doesn't, and Jerry doesn't want to do a long-term deal. So they're moving on. And you know what? I think it's best for both. I think the Cowboys do need a new voice, even though Mike McCarthy has been a good coach. I am all for fresh blood. I'm all for the reboot. I do think that after a while, you need to try something different. And maybe that's the case in Pittsburgh as well. Try something different here. The question is, who is it going to be? Mike McCarthy is going to coach next year. I don't know where. Keep an eye on New Orleans. Keep an eye on Chicago. Neither would surprise me. But what now do the Cowboys do? Oh, go get Kellen Moore. Everybody says bring Kellen Moore back. Sure, that's a possibility. And then on Monday night, the Deion Sanders news seeped into the air, into the ether. Schefter reported it. Ian reported it. Deion Sanders and Jerry Jones have spoken. There is mutual interest. Just throw it out there. At halftime, Schefter came on, told SVP and Jason Kelsey and Ryan Clark, yep, they've spoken. By the end of the game, Adam had a tweet. Okay? I'm going to read you this tweet. He said he heard from Deion, and Deion said this, quote, to hear from Jerry Jones is truly delightful, and it's intriguing. I love Jerry and believe in Jerry. After you hang up and process it and think about it, it's intriguing. But I love Boulder, and everything there is about our team, the coaches, our student body, and the community. You know what Deion didn't do there? He didn't say no. Didn't deny it. Confirmed that they had spoken and threw in the fact that he loves Colorado. Great. Great. Plenty of people take jobs and leave places that they love. He didn't say no.
So you're saying there's a chance. More than a chance, really.
I'm telling you, there's a chance.
Is this the best move for the Cowboys in regards to McCarthy? I had told you that there was this possibility that Jerry would look at this season and say, well, Dak was injured and we got more out of this group after the Dak injury, and that would lead to more seasons of Mike McCarthy. But if you look at healthy Dak seasons and where they ultimately ended, that probably is what led to this decision, is not taking the error of the recency of this season finishing better than you expected once you lost Dak, and instead looking at what you could actually get with Dak and what you had in healthy seasons with Dak, which wasn't enough. I mean, wasn't enough to a Cowboy fan base, wasn't enough for Jerry Jones, wasn't enough for what a lot of people out there will tell you the Cowboys are supposed to be each and every season, which you and I know is not realistic, but that's simply that with McCarthy. Deion's a fascinating one. The Kellen Moore thing doesn't, I mean, look, as an Eagles fan, yes, I mean, that one right now, I understand him being a hot name, but Kellen Moore did not set the world on fire in Dallas when he was there as the offensive coordinator. That didn't necessarily seem like something. I'm actually a little surprised based on Jerry's future that he wasn't loyal to McCarthy here. I thought this was going to be another contract for McCarthy, and I could have seen outrage about that because this team did not reach the conference championship, which is what everyone says the Cowboys are supposed to be doing year after year. Would I be shocked to see Deion? Not at all. And this is on par with what Jerry has done time and time again. But I remember the splash of Bill Parcells. I remember when that seemed like it was going to change what we knew about Cowboys football. And instead, what did we get out of that? Not much more either. I mean, really, Bill Parcells was a major splash at the time. And it still didn't move the needle that way. I'd love to see the Deion thing, but maybe more in the idea that I would just love to see the shenanigans than I think necessarily that would be more wins. Tough to say, as you said, 3 12-win seasons. Tough to say it's going to be better than that. but can it make a difference in the postseason? Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I thought Jerry was going to stick with Mike at this point. I really did.
I think it comes down to the money. So let's do the math. 10 years, let's say Mike makes 10. He's probably going to want more than 10, but let's just do 10 for the sake of argument. Let's say you commit to him 10 years. I'm sorry, 10 million a year, 3 years. That's 30 million. Let's say it's up to 35 million. And then another 15 million for his staff. Again, over 3 years. There's a lot of people on staff. So you're talking about a $50 million 3-year commitment, just economics. Are you willing to do that for 3 years with Mike McCarthy and his staff? Or if it's going to cost you $50 million the next 3 years for your coaching staff, wouldn't you rather try something different? And I think it's an answer that Jerry went, yeah, let's try something different. As for Deion, Jerry loves the show. Jerry sees dollar signs with the possibilities of teaming with Amazon that already does a Coach Prime show. I'm just thinking out loud here, and making the biggest circus in football an even bigger circus and putting it all on TV. And Jerry loves that. I don't know that Jerry can deal with the idea that the coach is a bigger star than him. That would be an interesting one. Also, if they do make this move, just hypothetically, is Deion rolling with Dak? He's owed $132 million in hard cash the next 3 years, and you already paid him like 70 this year, 80. He's almost an untradeable contract. Does Deion want Shedeur? Is there a way to pay some of Dak's salary, ship Dak out, move into the top 5, get your kid, play him at quarterback? Boy, you pay someone else to play Dak. There are a lot of moving parts here. I don't know that it makes sense, but darn it, it would be fun. It would be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that one as well. And one thing before we go is just this was stunning to me of everything that happened. And I know it was the first game of wild card weekend, but Texans, I mean, tip of the cap from you.
Talk about the boring Chargers here.
Yes, also a little bit of the Texans. You made a great point about the Texans. For those that like to kind of snarkily say Texans, hey, you've got the first game of wild card weekend, ha, that's where they put you because you're not really a marquee team for this league. Well, Andy Dalton twice they got in that slot, and they won that game. And as you pointed out, they beat the number 1 overall defense in your Browns last season in that wild card slot. And then again, the number 1 scoring defense in that wild card slot again. A lot of wild card wins.
At least you're in. You're
a lot of wild card wins.
They've led off. So the Texans have been to the playoffs 8 times since they were born as a franchise. 8 times. All 8 times they've played in the opening window on Saturday in the very first game. And they're 6-2. Good for them.
It's pretty great.
I'd rather, hey, we're in. Good for you.
We're in and we're not one and done. I mean, we're in, and yes, exactly. And now they're looking for their first divisional win. Yes, but that's a nice wild card record for a franchise that didn't exist a few years ago. I mean, I'm sorry, that's impressive. And on the other side of it, this game was 6-0, and if you watched it close, the Chargers were the better team, certainly for the first quarter. And you could argue before C.J. Stroud scrambled around and threw the ball into the middle of the field for what seemed like very
could have been up
a
21.
Rare answer. Yes, this game could have been much different. The Chargers looked like the better team early, and I was stunned to see Herbert turn the ball over the way he did 4 times, considering it was his first, and this is an odd stat, but his first road interception in his previous 275 attempts on the first one. And then it turned into 3 more after that. This is not what I saw coming at all in that game. And the Houston defense was very much for real. And from a sack standpoint, that's what Houston did all season. I mean, they had 2 players combining for 25 sacks this season. I mean, that's going to be formidable, but Herbert didn't look rattled early, but looked rattled in the totality of the game. And it was an ugly performance from someone that is a spectacular quarterback most of the time. That's as quiet a whimper from that team, that quarterback, as I could have imagined. I'm sorry. I'm going to say it based on what we had seen from Houston. since Tank Dell went down. That was a stunning final score, and it just never looked back.
I'm not stunned they won. I agree with you. I didn't expect that kind of lopsided affair. I agree with you. The Chargers blew golden opportunities early to blow them out of the building and hit them when they're down. They did not do that. There are 27 teams maybe that would take Justin Herbert over whomever they have now. 26. I mean, that's a good thought experiment there. He's great. I love him. Bright futures, bright days are ahead. He is, however, paid on his second contract now. He's making the big money. He played poorly. Harbaugh denied it, said he's a beast, he's a warrior. He's covering for his guy, which is fine. He played poorly. I think the Chargers had a very good year, and that is credit to Harbaugh. Also equal credit to Joe Ortiz, the GM. I think they got here a year early, but they got here in a weaker AFC. But to their credit, good for them. They didn't beat a good team all year. They really didn't. Maybe one.
Yeah,
right.
Atlanta was sort of the win at that time.
And in Atlanta,
yeah.
Kirk was on the decline, about to get benched. But hey, they showed up. They won a road game. I mean, not take it away from them. So they got there. They're a year early. You have Ladd McConkey, who's a fantastic receiver. He's a 2 as your 1, really. J.K. Dobbins came back, had a nice season. I don't know that your O-line lived up to the billing in this game. You got a lot of money, you got a lot of youth and pedigree and money soon on that O-line. Again, future is bright. Just they're not there yet. They're truly not there yet. It's
a nice season. Quickly, and I
nice season.
Say it was a nice season. We don't want to take away from that. I also thought interesting when you look back on the dominance of the Chiefs, the fact that 2 other teams in that division got into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that is impressive. And it took a Denver quote unquote win over Kansas City to get there. And we understand they were obviously sitting everyone because the Chiefs had nothing to play for. But Chargers were swept by the Chiefs and made the playoffs with a week to spare. And the Broncos as well made it despite being in that division. So again, you had talked about hope for other teams out there. I mean, there you go. I mean, those are teams that are in a division that they essentially know they cannot win. And yet 2 of them were in the playoffs.
And my final thought actually goes right off of that perfectly. The Broncos and the Commanders. There are 18 teams that didn't make the playoffs. 18 fan bases that sat on the couch and were just there for enjoyment this weekend. The Commanders and the Broncos should give all of those fan bases hope that you can turn it around and flip it. Not just because 4 teams make it that don't make it the year before, not the 4 new team thing, but because there is a pathway. The Broncos had a decent roster. They had to strip it down, get really young this year, but they found their quarterback. And they're well coached, but they found their quarterback. Commanders, total home makeover, right? But most importantly, they found their quarterback. They had Terry McLaurin. They had De'Ami Brown. They had some pieces, right? They had some pieces on the O-line, but they found their quarterback. Brought in a lot of new faces on defense. Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, most notably here, had some dogs up front, reworked the secondary a bit, got rid of a first-round pick in Emmanuel Forbes, probably gave up too much for Marshawn Lattimore considering what Mike Evans did to him, but they found their quarterback. You put Jaden Daniels on the Steelers. Everyone in Western Pennsylvania right now is buying a ticket to New Orleans. Jaden Daniels headed to Washington. They have their guy. It can turn that quickly. I don't know that Jaden Daniels is in this draft. I don't know. Is Cam Ward that guy? Shedeur that guy? I don't know. I don't think so, but you never know, and it can flip. I am telling you, there is a chance. And there's also a chance by the time we do the show again, I might have a voice. But right now, I do not. Sam, driving all over Southern California, thank you for finding time for this.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I'm just saying it right now. Cowboys trade Dak, the 12th overall pick, a 2, a 4, and a number 1 in 26 to Tennessee and take Shedeur with Deion as coach. Never going to happen, but we have 2 months now, 3 months actually, to make up crap like that. For Sam, I am Andrew, and we're thinking out loud. So long, everybody.